It's that time of year. It's time for Matt Williamson's world-famous draft ditties. We've got draft notes on every team in the NFL, starting with the AFC today. One draft note, what has been going on with these teams? How do these teams draft? What can we learn about what could happen in the 2024 draft in the AFC? Coming at you right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love all the everydayers out there. Subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Hit the notification bell so you know when we have a new episode up, the thumbs up if you love it, and I hope you do. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to play with if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, draft trends. Here we go. Matt's going to be on his way to Indianapolis for the Combine next week, so we're going to get some great insight there. But as we plunge headfirst into draft season, Matt, let's go back first and maybe learn some things about draft trends for these teams and what it could look like going forward for the teams in the AFC. We're going AFC first. We're starting east to west, and the first team up here is the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, so we do this every year, and here's my process. First of all, Draft Digest, they still put out a old school draft guide that you buy at the newsstand, and I write about it.
If I go to a newsstand, it's just like when I was, 19 years old, and I was pumped on the draft, and the only thing you had was Mel Kiper, and you had the one draft guide you could find at the newsstand, and I loved it. And I loved having a hard copy of the draft guide, and the heights and weights were all wrong because it was all written up pre-combine, it didn't matter. I loved it, and so even when I see one to this day, and I don't go to newsstands as often as I used to, I still love seeing the hard copy draft guide. So go pick yourself up a copy of the digest featuring Matt Williamson's draft ditties.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I have to throw this out there because somewhere upstairs and probably in the attic at this point, I have every Mel Kiper Blue Book, probably from 1980 when I was 7 years old until he stopped, even putting them out. I mean, I wore those things out, and my mom, bless her soul, would take me to like every newsstand, every pharmacy, looking for any draft guide I could get from like this time of the year forward. I'd end up with a few of them, but I mean, it's funny stuff though. But anyway,
pre-internet, it wasn't easy to find. You had to have the
sources.
Spot. It was similar to music. It's like which little hole in the wall record store has like the punk records where I can find this really hard to find album that I'm looking for that you just can't find anywhere. It's not just right on your phone to download. So it's or to stream. And it's funny because I still feel like I say old guy stuff like download. Nobody downloads anything. It exists in the cloud. It exists. It just shows up for you. Unbelievable. Anyway, draft ditties.
Yes. So anyway, one of the hot spots, actually, now I think about it, for those magazines was the Pittsburgh airport. So my mom would take me to the airport and would go just to the newsstand. We weren't flying anywhere. I mean, that was another spot. But anyway,
I didn't think about that. Then the airport newsstand, just to stop in, maybe get a burger and get a newspaper, get a draft mag.
Get a draft mag, right? I mean, that was you had to know the hot spots. But so my process for this is give a shout out to drafthistory.com. They're phenomenal. Any draft homework I do starts at drafthistory.com, and I go to the Buffalo Bills and just stare at their drafts basically until something jumps out at me that of a trend. Some are really stark. Some of them are, you got to squint a little bit, but sometimes when you really study recent drafts in particular, you find things out. Like, an odd one would be like the Rams. The Rams hadn't had a first round pick in a bazillion years, but they still make a lot of picks, so you end up with a decent middle to lower class because you have a bunch of fifth rounders, things like that. So I think it's a great way to learn about the teams.
And some teams, and I think the Buffalo Bills is one of those, where the trend might be the same trend as last year because they keep doing it.
Exactly. So here we go. Now, I'll read these off and then we can discuss each one. Some are more potent than others, but Buffalo has used their first selection on a defensive player 7 of the last 9 years, and Josh Allen was one of the years they didn't, of course. The Bills did use their first 2 selections, though, on the offensive side of the ball. That's the first time they've done that since 2014. So you would think between now and 2014, you'd go offense more than just last year. And they had that huge run of defensive players. This year, I feel like they could go wide receiver, corner, edge. I mean, like there's a lot of, they could be either side of the ball.
And it's funny because are they drafting on the defense because they keep screwing it up? And since they went offense, does that mean they finally figured it out on the defensive side of the ball? Or do they have to go back again to the defense? And that's where they lean. It's just that last year wasn't the right year to draft a Greg Rousseau or an AJ Epinesa or a Kyer Elam. So, but I mean, it's been defenders. And I'm pretty sure this was the draft ditty last year for the Bills. We're like, they're going to draft a big defensive end, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And I'll be honest, pull back the curtain. I saved last year's ditties and I see if they still apply and I cheat a little bit and, add one more year to the trend or whatever. And
yeah.
And this one was a little harsh because they did go offense the first 2. So they broke the trend last year,
Could the Bills be without Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs next year? Wide receiver is a sneaky big need for the Buffalo Bills.
It absolutely is. Yeah. I mean, if they go offense, I think it's going to be a receiver.
Good receiver draft, a lot of talent at the back end of the first round for this is one of the better. I don't know if it's because and I'm starting to get really deep with the scouting reports and prospects that could be there for the Niners that are picking 31 or my listeners on Locked On 49ers. Subscribe daily here on the Locked On Podcast Network. This is a really good end of first round class, like, because traditionally there's 18, 20, 22 maybe clean first round grades for most teams. It might be a bigger number this year.
I'm finding the same thing out. I think there's 9 upper tier really impressive offensive players that are probably going to go in the top 9 or 10 picks. Bowers, 3 receivers, 3 quarterbacks, and 2 tackles. But I don't think the cutoff of surefire first rounders happens till late in the first round compared to most years. And I have a lot more homework to do, obviously, on the 5th, 6th, 7th rounders. But that area of the draft looks like crap this year, to be honest with you. The end of the draft looks horrible. Yeah.
We're going top heavy, but not deep. Last year was a pretty deep class, I felt like.
Yeah.
Wide receivers also is that just going to be perennial stacked every year? I feel like wide receiver is one position the college just can't stop pumping out.
Yeah. And you mentioned this before, I think even earlier in the week, about all the 7-on-7 drills and things like that they do now, that the receivers are just plentiful.
Yeah, quarterbacks and receivers are just doing a lot more for a lot longer than they used to, especially with the way they're coached up and just how much they play, whether or not it's pro style or not. Next up, Miami Dolphins in the AFC East.
This one's very telling to me. So over the 2020 and 2021 drafts, the Dolphins had 5 first-round picks over those 2 drafts, right? But the last 2 years, 2022 and 2023, they've had 0 first-round picks, and their first selection each year didn't come till 102nd overall and then 51st overall. Like, that's the definition of pushing all your chips in with a quarterback on a rookie contract to try to win now. And now they're going to pay for it heavy. I mean, like, free agency's hitting them hard, and they don't have a first-rounder over the last 2 years, or even a second rounder in some cases, to come in and fill in as cheap, talented labor,
And what's crazy is they did a 3-for-1 in 2021 when the Niners traded up with the Dolphins to draft Trey Lance at number 3, and the Dolphins didn't draft any of those first round picks. They traded up the same day, basically from 12 from the 49ers pick. They went up with the Dallas Cowboys, was it? No, the Giants. Who was the team they traded? Oh, no, the Eagles. They traded with the Eagles, right? And they went up to pick 6 with the Eagles. Eagles went back to 12, then the Eagles traded back up with the Cowboys to get Devontae Smith in that draft. But anyway, so the picks that the Dolphins got from the Niners, they traded back up to get Waddle, so they didn't spend the 12th pick. The next year, they traded it for Tyreek Hill, and then they traded for Bradley Chubb, right? So
yeah, one was for Chubb, yeah.
3 first rounders that they got, so they should have been drafting even more than everybody, yet they didn't draft in the first round the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, they traded him for Tyreek and things like Jalen Ramsey, they went all in, and they didn't win. I mean,
and then they got the pick taken away from the league as well.
Oh, good point. Yeah, but I mean, the fear, teams tell you a ton, like they pushed their chips in the middle and they lost the poker hand. Now with Armstead and a lot of linemen and a lot of these guys coming up for free agency, their window might have shut on,
The big one for the Pats is it's a new regime in town. How do things change for the New England Patriots without Bill Belichick around?
Yeah, so since 2018, they made 5 picks in the first round. All were on offensive players. That's a case to me of just because they were bad at it. N'Keal Harry, guys
Right.
like that. Let's keep trying. They finally did break that streak last year with Christian Gonzalez as a first rounder. So, that little caveat there. But also, I love this sort of thing, but I don't know if they've made a count either. But in the past 2 drafts, they've made 6 selections in round 4. Like, that's cheap labor, special teamers, maybe 2 of them turn into starters. Give 6 picks in round 4. That's great stuff. I love that sort of thing.
And Bill, for years, was so good at that. He was trading down. He traded down as much as anybody, going from late round 1 into early round 2 and collecting a lot of the meat and potatoes of their football team. But yeah, unknown how things are going to look there. I think they did get a good one last year in Christian Gonzalez, though.
Yeah, I agree on that.
All right, next, we're going to finish up the East with the New York Jets. Head over to the North, South, and West. Draft trends, draft notes for all the teams in the AFC heading into the 2024 NFL Draft. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. And it is especially important to not allow the small thing to become the big thing. And therapy can be different for everybody. And we're sometimes therapists for teams. I know I am on Locked On 49ers after you lose the Super Bowl. We're therapists for some of those listeners. But most of us have bigger problems going on in our life than our favorite sports team. And it's important to get things off our chest with a professional, with someone who's unbiased, and get that off your chest every once in a while. Maybe just check in once a week and make sure you're hitting the goals that you want to hit in your life. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. The New York Jets to finish up the AFC East. What is their recent draft trend, Matt?
So going all the way back to 2017, they've made 10 picks in the first round, 5 on defense, 5 on offense, including 2 quarterbacks, Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson, in the top 3 picks overall. And I know Rodgers got hurt, but one side was really good, one side was really bad last year.
Right. Yeah. And beyond quarterbacks, right. And your biggest, it's funny because they drafted 2 top 3 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Then they went out and got future Hall of Fame quarterback. And it was still the worst position on the roster.
That's worse. Yeah. You used 2 top 3 picks and what turned into a second rounder, but it would have been a first had he played. And your quarterback situation was like the worst in the league.
Yeah. Mekhi Becton, the injury problems with him has been frustrating there. But man, Garrett Wilson, they have nailed some picks and really done a great job on the defensive side of the ball.
100%. Baltimore Birdies. Like I hope people realize this about the Ravens, and I have great respect for them in this regard. They notoriously make a lot of draft picks. They're like the best with the comp game. They're really good at making a lot of picks. But last year they only made 6 picks. You get 7. So that's not a huge number, but they only made 6 picks. The last times they selected less than 6 players in a round in a year was all the way back in 1999. And they've drafted more than 6 players every year since 99, with the exception of just 3 seasons. So they make a ton of picks, but this past year they didn't by their standards.
organizational philosophy, and I think it's a good philosophy. And really, even if you have 6 picks, there's really 8 picks per team because there's an extra entire round of comp picks that are given out every year.
Yeah.
But
And they usually get a lot of those.
It's funny because good teams lose players and then get comp picks back, and the bad teams add players, don't get comp picks back. So
It's a weird system.
A lot of good teams with a lot of extra picks. Cincinnati Bengals.
This one's very basic, but it's also very telling. So over the past 2 drafts, they've made 4 selections in the top 60. All of them are on defensive players. Like, all right, man, that's only 4 picks. Well, here's what's going on is they used to make a lot of picks on offense, Chase, Burrow, and now that they're going to pay those guys, they're going to have to be cheap on the other side of the ball. You know what I mean? So they're getting young on that side of the ball, to make up for all the expensive stuff on offense,
and have some guys that they let go on the defensive side of the ball. And then now at some point, T. Higgins, is he gone? And then it's going to flip back to the offensive side of the ball. And it's like, man, okay, we got to get cheaper there because we're paying, Burrow and Chase huge money once the Chase deal comes through.
Yep, 100%.
Cleveland Browns, obviously the big Watson trade affects everything with their drafts.
And this would worry me. I don't think it's hurt them yet, except for he hasn't played up to expectations. But I think it'll start to pay the piper because they have not made a selection in the first 2 rounds of either of the past 2 drafts. Like, that's hard to overcome. And they don't have a first-round pick right now for this upcoming draft. Their average pick over the last 2 drafts, their average first selection has been 71st overall over these past 2 drafts. Like, things inevitably go wrong. You need a tackle, you need a guard, whatever, and you don't have the resources to get them from college. That usually comes back to bite you.
And it sort of feeds into itself as well. So you spend a whole bunch, dollars and picks, and you got a quarterback, and he's not playing at the level he needs to. So that's an important position. And then now you have to pay more dollars because you don't have the draft picks to draft the players around him and the premium positions like edge and offensive tackle. But they got a couple of really good picks at those positions: wide receiver, edge, offensive tackle in the draft last year, even though they didn't pick high. So did they sneak through with being able to get some of those positions, even though not having high picks, which would be really important if they were able to do that? So fascinating. And you usually don't see, it's not like, oh, we didn't have a first round pick this year, so we're bad now.
Right.
We're bad 3 years from not having all those picks.
Exactly. It's going to hurt you a year or 2 from now, especially if it's almost like maxing out your visa and then be like, well, I'll go open up a MasterCard to pay off the visa,
right. Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously a stable organization. What is the trend in Pittsburgh?
Real stark one, honestly. They've gone 4 straight drafts with their first pick being on the offensive side of the ball. One of those was not a first. It was Chase Claypool after they didn't have a first rounder that year. But before that, they went defense with their first pick from 2013 to 2019. So BP, my Steelers have like the youngest offense in the league right now and the oldest defense because they have all their starters they drafted a while ago, the Cam Haywards and Watts and those type of dudes, but all their recent guys are offense.
So do you need to supplement the youth on offense? Because that's still the worst unit. The defense is good, but do you need do you need youth on the defensive side of the ball before they age out?
It's a great question. That's something I'm fighting right now. Is I'd love to see the Steelers sign secondary help, but I don't want to get older and older and older on that side of the ball. And it's a really good tackle, center, wide receiver draft. You're just going to keep getting younger and younger on offense, or do you go get an old guy to help pick it out? You know what I mean? It's a conundrum.
Can the Houston Texans doing it again? I mean, easily the best draft class, and it's easier to have a great draft class when you draft second and third in an NFL draft, which the Houston Texans ended up doing, but they nailed both of those picks. And when you find a franchise quarterback and a cornerstone defensive player like an edge rusher in Will Anderson, and even on down the draft, the Tank Dells and a ton of contributors for first year regime. I mean, phenomenal what the Texans did. Can they back that up? Because this team could get scary quick.
No doubt. So you kind of touched on it. Over the past 2 drafts, they've drafted the 3rd player overall in both years. It was Anderson and Stingley, and also the 2nd player overall last year, Stroud. That's wonderful. But I think people forget how awful this organization was before that, because from 2018 to 2021, the earliest Houston made a selection was 23rd overall. But during that stretch, their average first pick was just under 50th overall. And they weren't good.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that was those rough years of trading away Hopkins and for David Johnson. And they were a miserable organization for a while.
And they were a good team and with a good quarterback. And then the mismanagement happened. And all of a sudden, that's why you're drafting second and third in the draft back to back.
And Watson wanted out before he ever got in trouble. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Watson didn't know how good he had
it. That's true, right?
I mean, that was the glory days. Are you kidding me? Like, wow, unbelievable. Indianapolis Colts, over the past 6 drafts, the Colts have made 12 selections in the second round, but just 3 in round 1. And last year they made 6 picks in the 4th and 5th rounds combined. A whole bunch of athletes, and we'll see if their coaching staff can develop those guys.
I love it. I mean, just take a bunch of bites at the apple in the second round, the 4th, the 5th, bring a lot of bodies to camp, have a lot of competition. And if half those players hit, you are living large.
Insane athletes in their draft last year. And, some of them a little bit raw and we might not see them develop into year 2, year 3. But if some of those guys hit, I mean, unbelievable. So we'll see what that looks like for a really athletic and big Colts class from last year and see how that followed up this year. Picking 15 in round 1. To finish this up with the AFC draft ditties, we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Titans in the South, and then the AFC West draft trends next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right. It's 150 extra bucks to play with at FanDuel if your first bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props. Obviously, NHL hockey is still going. Baseball around the corner. Spring training is happening. And draft props as well. If you listen to this podcast, I think you might have a little advantage doing some of those draft props at FanDuel. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, here we go. Let's get to the Jacksonville Jaguars draft ditty, Matt.
So I think bear with me on this. It can be a little confusing, but I think it just shows how infrequently this team, this organization has had a good year going all the way back to 2008. So going back all the way to 2008, the Jags' first pick has been later than 11th overall just twice. I mean, they haven't picked in the top outside the top 11 only twice since 2008. And one of them was last year. They picked 27th overall last year. But from 2012 up until, I guess, over a 10-year stretch there, their average first selection was at 6.3 overall. Like, you're always picking in the top 6 or 7 for a decade. And you've been picking in the top 11 for like 2 decades. I mean, like, you should be better. I mean, just hit on some picks. Right.
I mean, multiple head coaches.
Yeah.
The 2021 draft, though, that was the big one. Trevor Lawrence at the top. They followed it up back-to-back #1 picks. Trayvon Walker. But before that, it was C.J. Henderson gone. Josh Allen, nice player. Number 7
franchise
overall.
Yeah.
He's a free agent this year. We'll see if he gets the franchise tag, what that contract looks like. Taven Bryan was later in the first round. In 2018, didn't do much. Leonard Fournette, number 4. Jalen Ramsey, number 5. Dante Fowler, number 3. And then all the way back to Blake Bortles in 2014. Luke Jokel. I mean, this is crazy how high they picked. Justin Blackmon. And some misses, too, with guys that were talented and just were not on the roster to compete for that team within 3 years.
Bortles, I mean, bust after bust after bust at the top of the draft.
Wild. That's a good one, actually. I like that one a lot.
Yeah. Explains a lot.
Jacksonville Jaguars fans don't like it a lot. But, hey, they might have turned the corner. So that's what's important.
I mean, Trevor Lawrence had a lot of that stuff, some baggage to overcome that he's in charge,
Tennessee Titans.
So of their last 13 first-round picks, only 3 have been on defensive players. But it sure seems like their defense has been better than their offense during that stretch. In the last 8 years,
Is it a coaching thing or is it a talent thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. Or style of play, Henry, grind it out. I don't know. But over their last 8 years, they are very balanced. Of their first 2 picks, it's either been offense, defense, defense, offense. So 7 of the last 8 years, they've gone one or the other. They haven't been heavy on either side. You see what I'm saying?
We can put in ink. It's going to be an offensive player this year, though, right? Either tackle or wide receiver at pick 7.
I think so. I mean, they're going to get one of those 9 I talked about. They'll be happy about it.
Denver Broncos.
I stared at them forever, and I had a hard time coming up with serious trends, but they've also had a couple different people in charge. So this is the best I could come up with. Since 2018, they've drafted 4 wideouts in either the first or second round. And frankly, they're not very good at wideout, and they might be drafting a wideout high still. And then another one, after drafting 29 players in 3 drafts combined, the Broncos only had 5 players drafted last year because of the Wilson trades. They're another team that makes a lot of picks. They were averaging like 10 a year for 3 years, and then last year they picked 5 guys.
The Kansas City Chiefs make me think of a nature versus nurture. When you're a good team and you're drafting at the end of the first round every year, yet you're still developing and churning out really good players, some of them not first-round picks, right? There's something to how well players are coached. And would Patrick Mahomes even be Patrick Mahomes, right? He was a top 10 pick, but what would he have looked like if he went to Chicago or Cleveland?
No doubt. So here they have 2 pretty distinct trends. Their first pick has been used on a defensive player 3 straight years. I mean, I think that's noteworthy, basically since Tyreek. And over their past 5 draft classes, they've made 8 second-round picks, and they've made those count. Some of those second-round picks the Chiefs have made have been quite valuable, and they're not expensive.
Yeah, and they got big-time free agents in Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed, but in recent first rounds, they've drafted McDuffie and George Karlaftis, at those positions. So are they preparing to not re-sign those guys? Do you have to choose between Sneed and McDuffie because that they're both good players, you have to pay the one or the other. So interesting decisions to be made for the Kansas City Chiefs, who are picking 32 yet again.
And they've learned how to win different ways, like all dynasties do,
Las Vegas Raiders.
See, this one would bother me. And again, there's new people in charge, so good. But over the last 6 drafts, I mean, that's a lot. They've made 10 choices in the 3rd round, which I love, and 9 picks in the 4th round. So they're making a ton of 3rd and 4th round picks over a 6-year stretch. You would think, and I think they're one of the worst in the league in nice depth, cheap guys, finding starters in the mid-round. There's not a lot of, Max Crosby aside, there's not many hits in that group. Or you would think the middle class of the Raiders roster would be awesome if you have all those 3rd and 4th round picks, and they haven't been.
And they've been so weird my entire life, and it's the family business. It's the Raider way, because I only grew up watching old Al Davis operate and do some weird stuff, right? With the crazy track stars he was bringing in all the time. And I think he was zigging while other teams were zagging early in his career. But, the Jamarcus Russells, and then, on to the latest group of showing nothing to show for all your first round picks.
Tons. I mean, even the Mayock era is really bad. They traded Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper for all these first round picks. Some of them are out of, league. I mean, they're horrendous. Leatherwood. Guys are just bad.
They were on the team in year 2 or 3 of their rookie contracts.
Yeah, this is really. They've probably been the worst drafting. Real quick, I bet them and the Jags are probably neck and neck for worst drafting teams over the last 2 decades or so.
Yep, I would agree with that. And we'll finish it up here in the AFC West with the Los Angeles Chargers.
Quick nugget on them. It looks like Mike Williams is getting released. I mean, that's not a shock. More to come there. But since 2007, this is going way back, they've made 18 first-round picks, 9 on offense, 9 on defense. But they have also now gone 4 years in a row using their first pick on the offensive side of the ball, which I think they probably will do again under Harbaugh, tackle or a pass catcher.
New regime, some expensive contracts. Veterans will probably be cut, maybe traded, restructured, something, because they've got to fix the cap situation here. They're a little old and expensive, and I'm fascinated. The Chargers are, I think, one of the most fun teams. You got a high pick at 5. You could go any number of directions there with that selection. You could trade down. What's the my wide receiver might be the best player available, but is that the identity that Harbaugh wants for his Chargers? So I can't wait to see how this ends up looking for the Chargers.
100%.
That is the AFC draft ditties. We'll come back tomorrow and we're talking draft notes, draft trends, the NFC draft ditties, all the teams in the NFC and what we can learn about maybe what they will do in the 2024 NFL draft. Talk to you then right here. Peacock and Williamson.